What is happening, all you aquarium aficionados, and pond super freaks? Welcome to the Pond Digger Podcast. My name is Erik Triplett. I am your host, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Erik Johnson, on the show. He's down in Georgia. I'm not sure exactly where, but he has a new book out, Saving Sick Fish, and he has a new reemergence into social media world, which I'm very excited about. And so I get to interview him and talk to him all about where he's been, where he's going. He's already been telling me some stuff from behind scenes. Before I have my beautiful wife on the show, look at me too, hello. We'll be broadcasting this on YouTube as well, and we're going to be, this will be on iTunes and Spotify and all that. So if you're new to my podcast, I just want to share with you, I share two forms of content a week. 2 podcasts a week, one's for contractors and entrepreneurs who are looking to grow their business, looking to be the best versions of themselves. And I'm interviewing people about marketing and branding and just, entrepreneurship and time management, all those kind of things to be a better contractor. And I believe that we can make the world a better place by creating better experiences between contractors and homeowners. I really, truly believe that, because there's some turmoil there. I want to just make that the best I can and do my goal is to participate in helping people be better. With that being said, the second part that you can expect from me weekly is some kind of interview, some kind of talking point about watering the garden and watering your living room and just touching people's lives with water. And sometimes it's about just the experience of you in your garden, whether it could be masonry work or greenhouses or permaculture, anything to just enhance that part of your life around water gardening. Or wildlife. Wildlife foundation and stuff as well, which we'll talk about. I'm excited to talk to Erik Johnson about that today too. So that's basically what you can expect from us weekly when you're here. And sometimes we do this live on Facebook and answer questions live with people, which I think today is going to be a real fun one with Dr. J. So enough about that. Yeah.
Dr. J.
Dr. J. Enough of that boring opening stuff. Let's jump right into the interview. Welcome to the show, Dr. J.
Hey. That's a pretty good opening, man. Is it the same opening every time? Or I guess you cover different stuff.
Usually I don't screw it up in the beginning because I'm usually sitting here and I'm not being distracted by beauty and smarts. And,
you did great, man. You did great.
No, I'm just a dumb contractor in a room all by myself. Okay, so listen, first of all, we're going to talk about your new book, Saving Sick Fish. If you're here it is, Saving Sick Fish. And you know what? I'm very excited about this. I feel I'm going to just address the elephant in the room right away and get this off my chest so we can just be cool, okay? You freaking disappeared on us for a decade, and I was really uptight about that. You just disappeared. I couldn't get a hold of you. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to bug you. Dr. J's gone. I hope he's okay. And then I just don't know. But now you're back, and I'm so glad. So tell us, where the have you been?
Did you bleep yourself out? Because I didn't hear the other one.
Yeah.
That's good. Cool. That's cool. So basically the hobby had just got to me. In 2007, 2008, there was politics, and there was people out there on the internet that were producing really bad information loudly. And I found that I was spending more time debunking some myths and undoing some damage more than I was actually helping people. And it wasn't like now, with Facebook now, you can jump on and help beginners, in a group of people that are like that, and it's awesome. But back in the day, in 2007, 2010, there were boards, and the boards had kind of gotten toxic, and I didn't really like it. And then I got involved in some of the larger politics in the industry and that sort of thing. So, and then years went by, and then I saw some koi at the store, and I just got to thinking maybe having a koi, and I got a koi, and then the infection started, and my spleen shut down and was replaced by a koi, and so then I decided to wade back in, and it's been fascinating, and I'm going to do this on my terms. I've made a start into Facebook just a minute, about, a year ago. So I'm back. And the concept there, and I know this sounds like a plug for the book, and it kind of is, but it's kind of not.
Good. I want it to be.
I couldn't get back into the hobby without this book, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm not going to wade into this thing again with the internet and Facebook and all that stuff without all the basic questions answered. Like I would blow my head off if I had to answer what is pH every time I logged in. I'm not doing it. So I put together this book. It's a freaking pamphlet, okay? And it covers in 40 pages. It covers all those things. And not just in beginner's terms. It's like, what is pH? Answers that. It'd be like a baseball book. If you could break baseball down into 40 pages, and then you'd have like, this is first base. This is what happens on first base. But imagine if you'd been in baseball for 20 years, right? And you could write a book that said, this is first base. This is the problem most players have with first base. And then you leave it and you go to second base. This is second base. This is where they run next. And then this is the problems they typically have with second base, like those fuckers trying to get back to first base and steal third. And then not deal with anything like third base is made out of clay. You know what I mean? So that's what this book is all about. It's 40 pages just to kind of bring you up to speed. And ostensibly, if you read that book, then the questions would be not what is pH? The question would be, I'm having trouble with pH for my African cichlids. I don't know if you know anybody who's into African cichlids, but I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble with my pH for these African cichlids, or my mormyrids don't like the pH. How do I fix it without screwing up my plants? Those kinds of questions are really, that's not covered in the book. Those nuances are not. And those are the fun ones, or all my fish are dying, and they already know what pH is, but how does it play? So the book basically is going to handle all my, just the first line questions. And then after that, I think they're the fun questions. I think if Leslie's handling most of your outreach for the sick hobbyists and stuff, and you've been doing a lot of that, I think it would be amazing if you could reach for something that just says, what's pH? What is ick? What is Chilodenella? And then you could talk about nuances of salt or API's general cure. Mm-hmm. Long answer to the question.
No, that's good. That brings a lot of light to it, actually. I mean, that actually helps me a lot. So question, how long have you been planning this book? And then back that up with how long did it take you to like put it together?
Okay. There's three parts to that. I had thought about the book a long time ago because Koi Health and Disease, which is the first book that I wrote, and it's on Amazon and all that. Koi Health and Disease was basically a user's manual. Thank you. It's basically a user's manual.
Page marks in here and stuff.
Right? Thank you for that.
This is the fucking Bible right here. This is it.
For a minute, it was all that there was out there. And it's been joined by amazing texts by Noga and Stoskop, and there's some really, really talented guys that got in and have done more detailed books. And what I thought would be good was to do a book that was actually less detailed. For the hobbyists that's coming in and like their job is brain surgery, right? So perfectly smart people, but damn, they don't know, they're just brand new. So I wrote a less detailed book. Well, anyway, so to answer that question, before when 2011 also held a divorce for me, and it started a lot of stuff and I didn't have time for practically anything except go to work, get married again badly, get divorced again, get married again, also badly, get divorced again. So, and I told you before I wasn't going to go too far into all that divorce shit, but I think anybody who's been through one can understand it's not fun. And that took up practically all my time from 2011 till about 2020 when I met my beautiful Bria. So,
wow. Well, let's hope you get it right this time. Jeez.
I really hope so. She's confident that she can shape me into something that's actually marriageable.
That's a tall order.
Indeed.
Okay, so I want to take the viewers and the people on the audio experience back a little bit. When did you write Koi Health and Disease? When did you write this one?
So Koi Health and Disease was put together from a giant pack of handouts that I'd written. I found that people really needed information on salt. They really needed information on potassium permanganate and one thing, a quarantine, how to modify pH, hold pH still, commercial buffers. And anyway, so I had this giant stack of handouts. And somebody said, why don't you just slap it all together and make a book, right? And I thought, all right, well, this leads into this, this leads into this, and I did a book. And then I produced that. So that was that. And
What
that
year?
book's been out 1996, 1995, something
Wow.
like that. Yeah, it's been out there for a long time. It's sold self-published. Never had anybody pick it up and run with it. And it's over the course of that time, it sold 10,000 copies.
Okay.
That's no New York Times bestseller, but
Well,
it's a niche publication.
it's been a Bible for me for, 2 decades. So I was going to tell you, if I remember correctly, it was in 2003 where my wife and I commissioned you and Vicky Vaughn to come out to our facility
That
and
was fun.
do a wet lab. And that was a really, really important move in my career. And because, you know, I love koi, I love cichlids, I love aquariums, I love ecosystem ponds, dedicated koi ponds. I love all that stuff. But in '99, I came up doing ecosystem ponds and I did them really well. And I became very popular in that world. Then suddenly, are you going to show that off?
Yeah,
Well, what did you just get? Just remember where I left off, how important that move was.
this is fun.
So, we have our wildlife rehabilitation foundation. Do you know that anything about that yet?
Not yet.
What do
I
we
keep
do?
waiting for her to.
So we just got our 501c3 last year.
2020.
In 2020, we got it. But let's just
Awesome,
do
dude.
wildlife rehab since '83. We took some time off when the kids were born, but look what we got here. This just arrived.
Awesome.
This is a great horn.
That is fantastic. Is that a juvenile?
It is a juvenile. And so, sorry.
Control the wings, woman. Jeez.
So he left the nest too early, fell into the
Oh.
pool. They tried to put it back. He bounced back out. So these girls just dropped him off.
Oh.
He'll go back when he flies good. He'll reconnect with the parents there, and then they'll teach him everything he needs to know to go back out in the wild.
They'll know him?
They'll know him. Yeah. We've literally had owls away from their parents for 3 months. And as soon as we release them back to the site, if the parents are still there, they fly right up to them, and then the
Wow.
babies fly off with them. It's very cool.
Huh. Where the hell you been?
Yeah.
Next time I say you come home, you come home. That's what curfews are for.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
Fantastic.
that's our life with wildlife rehab. And we can get into that. You imagine you might have a couple questions about that. But back to the 2003 when we brought you out to do the wet lab with us.
That was in 2003. That was so long ago.
Maybe
Right.
2002, maybe 2002, right? But roughly that time frame. It was over 20 years ago. Yeah, but
20 years.
yeah, it was that, and that's why and your personality type and the way you tease and you joke.
Because we found this book and the video that went with it at Mystic Koi in Upland. And I took the video home and I plugged it in. I was watching it and I'm like, did he just burp? Did you hear that? I think he just burped right there. And he
I
made
forgot
He's
that.
burping. And my husband's like, no. I said, well, let me rewind it. Look, he's making the fluke burp. So that's the personality right there. And of course, that gels with us really well.
Yeah, just that fun thing. So that's why I was so devastated when I couldn't get a hold of you after our time together, after a short time together. But so the point I want to make is at that point in my career, a lot of the fish hobby, the koi enthusiast, the koi specialist, they just thought I was an ordinary landscaper that just blew ponds in the ground and left and didn't give a shit about anything. They didn't realize I only build ponds because I love fish. Like that was my passion. I didn't love money so I could build ponds so I could earn a living. I was just like, hey, if like these aquariums, I only have a 300-gallon aquarium in my house. I could build a 3,000-gallon pond in my backyard, right? So, but I came
Yeah.
up through the ecosystem world, and so I was really frowned upon by koi enthusiasts in the dedicated koi pond industry. But when I brought you out, it was a really interesting twist because I had people from all the koi clubs come to that wet lab, and you literally made them, what were that, koi health advisors. Koi health advisors were built out of the ecosystem pond guys wet lab, where Dr. Johnson and Vicky Vaughn came out, and they learned how to do the microscope, right? And then within the next decade or so, now I'm speaking at their club meetings, back when they used to shit on me. But like, you were the stepping stone to get them to go like, well, maybe Erik's not a complete 100% douchebag. Maybe we'll give him a little bit of space. But it took me another decade for them to go, oh, okay, cool, you can come and speak at our club. But
Yep.
that was an amazing time. We learned so much from that event. It was so great.
I was glad to be there. It was really fun. I remember a lot about that. After you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, it was so much fun. Yeah, it
But
was cool.
But literally, you shaped, like I think 2 or 3 koi advisors were made out of that meeting, and those
Mhm.
people, so like your reach is a whole lot deeper and wider than you could even imagine, right? I mean,
Mhm.
not only 10,000 copies of your original book out, but like you helped, like we have instances. I feel like I'm gonna do all the talking, but Leslie can speak to this. We have instances where someone came to us with sick fish and like, hey, we've been to some other koi facilities, and they said you can just shit can these guys and we'll get you new ones. And tell the story. You want to tell the story?
I don't remember this
Oh
one.
my gosh.
Keep talking.
And
It's 20 years, man.
no, yeah, they were out of
many
San Bernardino, that older couple out of San Bernardino, handsome Italian guy, older dude. He was retired. Anyways, the other dealers were like, hey, you should just probably shit can these fish or whatever. But the fish were already like 12 or 15 years old. They were very special to the people. And Leslie's like, bring them down. We'll figure it out. We'd already done the wet labs and all that. We were doing biopsies. And now we're like, hey, this
Simmental? Are you talking about
Simmental. Yes, Simmental.
Got it.
And so she's like, no, you should, this is what we're going to do. She saves all those fish. I got goosebumps. This is amazing. She saves all the fish. The people are crying, and like, they worship my wife because
Yeah.
while someone's like, give up on these, we'll start over, she made it happen because of you.
It would be interesting. I don't know how many people remember seeing their first favorite fish for the first time. Like, if they have a favorite fish, it's that big orange one with the long fins. I wonder how many people can remember seeing it for the first time, all small in that little tank. I mean, they get attached.
My favorite first fish that
Yeah.
I do.
What's your favorite first fish?
That Kikusuri, that yellow and white one that we got from Mystic Koi. That was my.
No, but I'm talking like way back when you were a little girl, like your favorite first fish.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh,
The
gosh.
fish that are breaking to nobody remembers fish from their little girl, do you think?
Well,
She has a crazy memory.
Yeah.
My first little fish that I got, besides like the aquarium fish that my parents just put in, but my first fish were zebra danios, like 3 of them, and I loved them, and they were in my bedroom. 3 little zebra danios.
I remember
Go ahead.
I remember walking into a pet store, Joe the Fish Guy's store, and I remember walking in, and he had a hexagonal, maybe a 90 hex as you walked into the dark fish room, and he had some really large hatmori, probably the largest hatmori I've ever seen. And they were just nice, big old cranial, nuchal hump on them. They were just, I've never seen them again like that. I just loved them. And maybe I haven't seen them like that again. It's a fairly common fish, but I haven't seen them like that again because it was 30 years ago. The fish were different back then. But also, maybe it was 35 years ago. And
it's more than that. We've been married for 26 years. I mean,
it was a long time ago. It was not 40 years ago. It was about 35, maybe 38 years ago. But so the fish were different.
Long time.
Yeah. But I just maybe it was just like the dark room and the hexagonal tank, and then they just hit me, and like, they're larger than life to me. And
How old were you at that point?
I was 21, 22. I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun. So much
And
fun. Tell them now that you got to tell them the hapchromis that's not a koi. It's not any kind of goldfish or anything.
yeah, it's an African cichlid, but
Okay, because they're all like, what? I've heard of Sankey, I've heard of Showa. I've never heard of hapchromis.
yeah,
Like what kind of kawari mono is that?
yeah, yeah. Well, I do have a lot of people on the podcast. Well, we're live on the Pond Digger page and on Facebook World, but a lot of people that follow my podcast know that I'm a cichlid freak. They know
Mhm.
yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. So we remember some of the fish that we got and when we got them. Some of like people get them on their anniversaries and stuff, and then they get sick, and they got some jerk telling them, "Oh, well, that's a bad sore. I think that's about through and through. I'd just get rid of that. I got a good one over here. I'll give you." It's just no. They're almost as good as dogs.
Yeah.
Not quite as smart. Can't housebreak them, but they're amazing, and people love them. So if you save them, it's a good thing. And so yeah, you get, and then when you give them a microscope, like at a meeting like we had at your place, and you give them a microscope and some techniques to save them, all of a sudden they're empowered that their desire and their affection for these fish can be matched by the power to save them. It's very powerful. And so if people bounced out of that, able to save some fish, that is powerful. It's got a heck of an echo.
Yeah.
Um,
I think of them. I think of them as pets in a different regard than a lot of people, and I try and explain that to people because, if you like a big dog, a lot of big dogs only live 7, 8, 10 years, right?
True.
And then but you have koi, like a koi. It's not common, but I'll come across some that are in their 30s, right? I don't see
Yeah.
that often, but there's a 30-year-old fish. Like if you do your job well and you manage things well and you have some good, information to help manage sickness and stuff, like they could outlive 3 dogs.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Crazy to
So
think.
yeah, they live a long time and they become very dear to you. And some of them have lived in 5 houses. Some fish have made it through 3 wives. And so yeah, they're great. They are great. Being able to save them is a nice thing. Koi herpes virus has brought that into sharp focus because people have collections that are very old collections of fish that are 15 years, 20 years, 30 years they've had them, and then koi herpes virus starts ripping through, which is it's I don't know if it's curable or not, but you can stop the mortalities with heat. And I remember there was a pond. It was a fellow that was really big in the Atlanta Koi Club, and he was losing a fish. I think the name was fish's name was Hogger or something. And we got with him in plenty of time to save that fish and some other ones that he and his wife were in love with. And we heated them up, got them to 83, 84 degrees, and pulled them all through that. And that was amazing to be able to save a collection. They had carried that fish. Warthog was the fish's name, Warthog. And they had carried the fish home from Japan. They were on their anniversary, and they got this little black and white fish in Japan, and they carried it home on the airplane illegally in their baggage. And so that fish was so precious, and we could save it. I think that might be one of my favorite save the fish things. So yeah, they value them. And there was also a time that we were bridging. For a little while, there was a real rift between the ecosystem ponds and the dragster ponds. Like if you had like 5 modules of like UV and a skimmer and bead filtration or Baki showers or a Nexus or something like that, and then you had another thing with tubes, that was cool. Clean bottom pond, no gravel, no plants, just which is fine. Fully keep your fish that way. I would love to. I did, and it was amazing because the fish look like they're floating in glass. But you have to control all of those things. Like I was looking at a picture of a filter. A guy named Alan Howells is a friend of mine from a long time ago. He sent me a picture of his filter, and it does everything, and it does a great job. And his fish are like 25, 30 years old. And he was showing that to me, and I wanted to redo the picture and go, well, this is what the sun does. This is what ambifera does. This is what plant agglutinins do, because like there's a natural answer to each of the pieces. So you can take control of those things and do a good job of it like Alan does, or you can let nature do those things in the ecosystem pond. which takes me to my original point, is that for a minute there was a polarity between people who were like, oh, ecosystem ponds with the gravel on the bottom, that's trash. And then you have to have tubes and wires in a bottom drain, liner pond, no gravel. Now they're starting to realize, you can do it both ways. Like those people with gravel bottom ponds have enormous spawns every spring. If it was so bad for them, what's with all the babies,
Yeah.
And koi eat live plants. Well, not if there's enough of them, just crazy stuff. And so the barrier on that, I think, broke down about 5 or 7 years ago. And people started realizing that there's more than one way to do it right. And I wouldn't say that I'm an ecosystem champion or an ecosystem sellout, because I still like the dragster systems, but I'm not gonna. I'm old. I don't have the time for a dragster system. I cannot toddle out on this ankle and check pressure gauges every day. If I can hear it from across the yard, I'll be like, "Oh, that sounds good. I'm sure they're fine," And that's good enough with an ecosystem pond. And then all you have to do every year or two is just get somebody to come out and clean it. That's a pain in the ass, but it's so much easier every year or two to have somebody take care of it than it is for me to go out every day and make sure that the thing isn't backing up because the filter's clogged. So, yeah.
I don't want to shock you with something. You may or may not know this, and I might shock you a little bit, but we lost Bill Dabrowski about 10 days ago from Mystic Koi. He passed away.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that.
Terrible loss. I really liked Bill a lot. And one of the things that I learned from Bill that I'm glad to get this on the podcast. I did a little story on Instagram for it, but Bill was really, really cool. And he was cynical and fun in a dark way if you could get him alone, especially if you had a beer with him, so like he taught me something, and I want to share that with the listeners. He taught me there's 3 things that all koi enthusiasts will agree on, and then they'll fight to the death. They'll piss and moan and fight and fuck and kill and, pillage and say bad things about each other on how to get those 3 things done, accomplished, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so it's number 1 is to get everything that's organically debris, like any organic waste and debris, get it out of the pond. Okay. That's rule number 1. And then they're going to argue on how many bottom drains, midwater drains, or jets, or aeration, or skimmers, or what kind of skimmer, or like they would argue about all that. So let's get all the organic waste out of the pond, separate the solids before biological filtration is number 2, and then nitrify the water and get it back to the pond is number 3. And so those are the 3 things that everyone agree on. But then they piss and moan and talk shit all day long about how to get it done and their relationship with this manufacturer and relationship with this builder. And then that's how they would run their life. But every time I would run into a pond, I could still do it to this day. And I still am very thankful about the knowledge I learned from Bill on that. Is I look at a pond and I'd be like, how are we getting the stuff out? How are we separating solids? And how are we cleaning that water? And everyone can do it in different ways.
Yep.
Successfully.
We had I don't know how that it is related in that I think people are starting to learn about the other system. Like the people that are into dragster filtration systems are learning. Okay, all right, I can see how that works. And I think ecosystem ponds people are starting to figure out how the dragster systems work. I've seen people retrofit their skimmers with a different kind of skimmer going to a bead filter. It's not really necessary, but it's a way of doing it. And so people are opening their eyes to other technologies and blending those technologies. Like you'll see ecosystem ponds with UVs on them, which UVs used to be just the stomping ground of the high-end koi connoisseur. But now you've got ecosystem ponds with UVs on them, which aren't, again, always necessary. It's a mix and match. But there was a case, it was interesting. I was an expert witness on a case, and a guy was saying that aquascape pond or that ecosystem pond killed all of his fish. And the guy was propped up as kind of an expert, and I was expert witness on the other side. And the holes in the case were, do you know how the ecosystem pond works? And he was like, no, you don't have to know how crap works. But it was kind of like, then how can you be an expert witness to say that system killed the fish if you don't even know where the water goes first? So it was really, I think for some people at that time looking at that case, they were kind of going, huh, I guess I guess we probably, if we're going to be experts in this industry, we should probably know how everything works. Like we should know Nexus, Baki, and we should know um, uh, brushes. Remember, I don't know if you remember brush filters. They were great, but
Yeah.
an ecosystem and bead and all of that different stuff. And even when people try to use sand filters, I think we should know all of it if we're experts in the industry in that area,
100%.
and to be able to integrate all that stuff. And the industry has come a long way in that regard. So, and so have fish. Holy crap, the fish that they're bringing in now. It's amazing. Do you
Yeah,
guys have fish out there?
we do. We do have fish, not like the ones you're seeing, at the All American Koi Show and stuff. But yeah, we have.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you sell them?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
So talk to more about this book and how we can lean into it for saving fish. I want everyone to know more about this book. And at the end of the show, we're going to do live Q&A, and we're going to give away a couple of books to people who have some good questions. The shitty questions, no, you don't get a book. But at least we got a couple of good questions coming out. We got a couple of books that we're going to send out. And I'm actually mad about you. I'm upset about something. We're really
Okay.
want to tell you that you sent me this book, and I looked through it twice. There's no autograph in here. I'm just like, what the? You couldn't even autograph it for me? What?
Right. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay, so if we're lucky,
Yeah.
the ones that we give away at the end, like maybe there's an autograph in there.
If they want to,
Okay.
and I'll send another book out properly signed. And
I'll make sure this
absolutely.
one gets to someone important that needs your advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
long did it take you to write this book?
A long time. It was, oh my God, the publishing process. I mean, first I had to sit down and I wrote this book and it was like 80 pages long. And I was like, no, that misses the point. You know what I mean? Like this has got to be, somebody with dying fish should be able to read this in one evening and then go out tomorrow morning and save, well, at least start to save their fish, right? So I had to cut like 80 pages down to 40 pages with pictures. So that was challenging. And they get it down to a manuscript I like, and then I have to set it up, convert it to PDF, send it to the publisher. They don't like it. Then I have to get it back, redo it, format it, and send it over. I got 3 rounds of author's copies, all kinds of messed up stuff. And then it's finally ready. So I would say production time from pen to paper was probably a year.
Okay.
Oh, that's not that
Yeah. Nah, it just seemed like it, because it just seemed like it should have gone a lot faster than that. So
I read it. I read half of it 2 days ago, and I read the other half of it, in about 30, 40 minutes before I got on the phone with you. Right?
yeah.
I mean, I went through it. It's great stuff. It answers.
I read it like a month ago when we got the first copy.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't have a chance to read it until a couple of days ago, but I think it's great. It's interesting because I think on every page, there's 40 pages. Like every page is like, make sure you have aeration in your whatever system you're keeping fish in. Like it's like the knowledge in here is fairly basic, fairly simple. It's so like it's all the answers to the problems.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't even talk about getting pH down, because it just doesn't happen as a problem. You know what I mean? Like, so the pH stuff, you and Leslie know the pH stuff, the ammonia stuff, the nitrogen cycle and all that junk. The beginners don't. They don't, that's absolutely, that blows them out of the water. So you have to make that very simple. But then you come at it with okay, and what are the problems with pH? Why does pH matter to you? Where's that going to go wrong for you? And that's usually in a falling direction. Or ammonia, measuring it, understanding when it's going to be a problem, what causes it. And so everything is kind of like, well, here's the basic concept. This is the problem that's associated with it. So yeah, you were able to tear through the book in a very short period of time. It's all information that you have, that you know, but then it comes across with like a problem solving spin on those common things. It basically, I think a person who read that could probably pilot themselves through practically every reason that their fish are dying. As I'm in one of the beginner groups on Facebook, all I want to do is get on there and go, hey, I wish I was giving them away, really. I just read this, and 3 hours later, you won't even have that question,
Yeah.
So And I'm not saying that in a judgy way. It's just that if you can get it down to bite-sized chunks and you can cover it in 3 hours and just be done with it and not have all those problems. Cloudy water, how to fix that? Sponge filter, Tetra water clarifier. Boom. Bioseeding. Go down to the river, grab you some mud, put some
Boom.
water with it, decant the water. Boom. Instant cycle, right? pH is falling. C-chem neutral regulator. Boom. IC and hexamida in your fish. APIs, general cure. Boom. So since the book can recommend anything it wants, I mean, if there's a medicine for it, I can recommend that. And if there's a better medicine that comes out, I can recommend that. I just found a source for koi medicated food with aquaflora in it, which is fluorphenicol. It's the best antibiotic out there. I don't manufacture it. I don't sell it. I just know who has it.
Wow.
And yeah, so I can put that in my private Facebook group, but I'm not going to post that right out there in the middle of the world because there can be some liabilities for somebody selling an antibiotic-enriched food. Oh, you might be aware that Koi Market has a food that's suitable for addressing some bacterial infections, to put it.
Sean Rosen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those kinds of resources and stuff, that's what you, in the book, that's what you get. And you probably have already mentioned it or noticed that in most of the pages on the book, there's a QR code. So in 40 pages, you can't give people everything that they probably need, right? So if they want to go further, like on this page, there's a QR code right there. So if they're learning about an irrigation system and it's got the parts list and all that, and they want to do a flow through filtration trickle system, but then they're kind of like, I don't know, we kind of need to know how that affects background pollution, or is there a better way to do this? Or what do you do about the chlorine? Just little extra questions. Then you can take the QR code. There's 22 QR codes and 61 extra pages on the website that those QR codes go to.
Mm-hmm.
Just to take the concepts a little bit deeper, like heating. You don't tell people in the 40-page book that every 10 degrees you jack up a poikilotherm, that their metabolism doubles. You can't tell people in a 40-page beginner book that the cytochrome P450 oxidase system in the spleen is important for detoxifying the thiophenols. I know you know that part, but the beginners don't, right? So you handle that, got to handle that gently.
Sometimes when I go through this book, if I'm going through something, I'm like, hey, what the fuck does he mean right here? Tell me what to do. And I give it to the
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that book is good for that kind of thing. Like, it does go into some more depth, but I realized after writing that one, and then in years subsequent to that, what people really need is usable information on the most common things that happen in their systems.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that book is all about. And I'm glad you have a copy for it. Some people are using it as a training manual for their employees. They're just handing it off to their retail managers and stuff, and they're like, just read this. Chances are we won't lose as many fish. And then when they contact me, I'm kind of like, yeah, all right, well, are you checking your pH? And they're like, yep, got the pH under control, blah, blah, blah. And then we can deal with more subtle things. So.
What do you got, woman?
I don't got nothing. Keep talking.
Okay. So I want to tell you, a sick fish is the reason I'm where I'm at today, because of a sick fish. Okay. And to bring it home, I was crazy about the fish. I saw that hat moray larger than life in the pet store, and the owner of the pet store, my dear friend of over 30 something years, he tells me, one day he's going to have a portable aquarium service and he's going to run around. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, people will pay you to go to their house and take care of their fish. And like, it just really shook me up. Right. And he said, yeah, doctors and lawyers, they have them in offices.
Because at that point he was a construction dude.
I was a framer at the time, but I would just go and blow my whole check every Friday on aquarium stuff at the store, right? But he told me about that. And so I was just immersed in my passion and love for fish. And that's all I talked about. That's all I did besides skateboarding and surfing. But then one day I was home and I got done at the end of the day and I'm doing water changes or something. I had 7 or 8 aquariums in my apartment and I was doing all my shit. And the phone rings and I walked over to the wall and I picked up the phone on the wall and I'm like, hello. And they're like, hey, is this Eric? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, hey, man, I know you don't know me. This is maybe a strange question, but like, I got this fish tank. The fish are dying. I don't know what to do. And it was like a Saturday night or something like that, right? It was in the evening. And I'm like, who were you and how did you get my number? What do you mean? Why are you talking to me like this? Who asked, like, why are you asking me these questions? Where did you get my number? And they're like, oh, I met so-and-so. They were at the grocery store. They told me you're kind of crazy about fish and you could help me. So they gave me your number. So I'm calling you. And I'm like, I remember this. I was like, where are you? And they're like, oh, I'm at such and such. Like, how do I get to your house? And I just like hung up the phone and I went to the house and I helped save all their fish. And I got goosebumps, man, because it was just like, I'm like, this could really happen. People would pay you to come to their house. I didn't ask for money. I just went there to do it. But, that was like the start of it all. I'm like, I could make this work.
Yep. That's awesome.
So a
Yep.
sick fish is the reason why I'm here today with this beautiful woman.
Because that's how we met, of course. You remember he used to come into my pet shop and he was the little fish boy. So
Little fish boy.
Little fish boy. Well, you guys are close in age. You must have been the little fish girl running the pet store.
at that point, yeah.
Yeah,
I was.
she
It
was
was a
little.
long time ago.
Right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Were you working at the pet store or did you own it?
No, at that point I was just an employee.
Yeah,
I didn't buy it for a while after that. So yes.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's fun when you save fish like that and you get the satisfaction of being able to put that guy on the right track and know that most of his fish are going to make it after that. That's cool.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
still keep in touch with them or know who they are? Or,
I have no idea who they are. I mean, I
yeah,
wouldn't. I mean, I don't know if they're in the hobby. I don't know if they're alive. I don't know anything about it. All I know
right.
is I helped the
Just
person.
got you started.
Yeah, but it was like
Yeah.
because I was so blown away by the thought of driving to people's homes and helping them.
Mhm.
It's fascinating to me because I was so in love with my fish tank stuff. But that was like the real catalyst. Like this could happen. That was profound to me, and
Mhm.
it's fun from there. Quit my day
Yep.
job and starved for about a decade.
A decade. Right.
Breeding fish and taking care of stuff and trying to figure out business and all that shit. Yeah.
Yep. It's a
So
learning experience.
share a story with the viewers about when Doc Johnson was out here, because I remember he came to the pet shop when we had him out in 2003. Do you remember this scenario I'm thinking?
Does it have to do with the cat?
Yeah. Yeah. Tell the story
I
about
don't know
that.
that. Well, do you remember that kitten that lady brought in? Do you remember that it freaked me out so much? Do you remember that? You don't remember?
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, so that girl walked in the front door with that cat that she said was wild and she had just caught it and it was just sitting in her hands going, and I'm like, oh, no, there's something wrong with that cat. It can't possibly be that tame from out of the wild. You got to get it out of my store before it makes things sick. And then I got home and I was so upset because I had kind of been short with her, but I was scared that cat was going to bring something into my store. So then I was at home and I'm pacing back and forth in the living room and you walked in and you're like, what is wrong with you? And I said, I just think I handled that badly, but I was so scared, of what that cat might have.
Mhm.
So, and you said, I've never seen anybody pace like that in real life, just in the movies.
Wait a minute.
Right.
I remember him holding a cat. Was it the same cat? He was at the store and he had this giant man had this little kitten in his hand and he was inspecting it.
Oh, maybe I had you look at it because you were there. Maybe I was just so freaked out by the whole thing.
I just remember
Yeah.
him looking at it and I was like, I thought he was a fish doctor. What a cat. What's he doing? But
Right.
But at that point in time, you saw other things too. Fish wasn't your only thing.
Sure.
You did other things at the vet hospital.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's still that way. I mean, I see dogs and cats all day long.
Yeah.
So, and then all my fish and all of Bria's fish, and then I see some fish locally, and that's always fun. I keep an oar in. I don't travel like I used to. I used to. I mean, it was every 2 or 3 weeks I'd be flying someplace to do a seminar or something like that, and and that was tons of fun for a younger person. But now the pond calls are pretty much if you're within 10 miles of the house, I'll go see your fish, which means that I'm probably doing a house call every 8 weeks, 8 or 12 weeks. And there's plenty enough for photographic documentation and learning and web content and all that stuff. And it's usually a rehash of all the same basic problems. And so yeah, I'm still doing dogs and cats and then the fish kind of on the side. So, and white street frogs and sulcata tortoises. And it's just crazy.
Any wildlife stuff? Are you doing any wildlife stuff at all?
I had a very interesting case. I've got a license to handle everything but the, and you guys know better about these licenses than I do. I can handle pretty much everything that can't kill somebody. And I can't do taloned raptors, and I can't do bears and whatever. But I can patch up a chipmunk, a squirrel, and a possum legally. And yet we still had a red-tail hawk. Isn't that what they're called, red-tail? And I think it hit a windshield, had a broken wing. And those things are so easy to pin. That's just an observation from somebody who's never pinned one ever, officially pinned one. And but they are K-wire in the bones of their medullary, so they're hollow. There's air in all the raptor wings, and you can pin those. Then if you could just get them to eat, they'll heal like crazy. And then they can fly away. So that's the wildlife stuff is highly unofficial. And then the turtles, I'm really enjoying the turtles. So they'll get smacked, and we can put some of those guys back together.
Do you fiberglass them?
You can. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll use stainless steel. We'll drill holes on the edges of the cracks, and we'll put stainless steel wire, and then we'll put duct tape.
Oh.
No, right? Duct tape. And then you can cover that with silicone sealant. You got to keep, the only reason for the duct tape is to keep the silicone sealant from getting into the turtle. And then you silicone sealant those things, and then you can come back weeks or months later and peel off the silicone sealant, and the turtle's good to go. And we'll leave the stainless steel in the shell indefinitely. If they're not split across the spine, if they can use their hind legs, they're good. If they can't use their hind legs, we have a tendency to put them in the freezer.
Wow.
It's not fair to have a turtle dragging its hind legs around for the rest of its life if it's a wild turtle.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, that's awesome that you pin that bird for those people. I have some local vets that I work with, but it's difficult to get them to do that kind of surgery.
Why, I wonder?
I don't know.
So much fun.
I don't know.
It's so easy.
I know.
Yeah. I would never try that surgery on somebody's bird, with that kind of liability and everything. But when people come in and they go, yeah, this wing is hanging off, you can't even eat. You know what I mean? Because if it's broken, it's just hanging down. They're on the perch. They're perfectly fine, except they can't get around with this wing. Just So we have sound effects over here.
Just don't burp, okay? Jeez.
Yeah.
So the corvids are my challenge for that because, as long as it's not compound, right, then you can wrap it and set it in place. And if it's close enough, just keep it and it'll heal, right? But the corvids are such little buttheads. They just pick everything off it. I mean, I've tried everything to lock those suckers down. I wrap them up and get it all tight and put a sock over them and cut it off so it can't go anywhere. And they're just and I go out and they're everything's off.
Yep.
Oh. So they're so funny. But the others are much easier to keep wrapped up.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So as a vet, when you are, it's tricky because, I'm just trying to figure out how to frame this question. For us, I'm not a veterinarian, even though I've saved a lot of fish from tropicals to, cold water fish. I can't really go to someone's house and medicate someone's pond, without having some liability there. I'm not a vet. I can't treat other people's fish. But what I can do is say, hey, this is what I've done. for my fish, and this is what, if those were my fish, what I would do for you, and this is how I would approach it, the salt, dimmelin, whatever it is. And then I can just give advice, but I don't want to go and administer any medications to people's ponds. Even though there's people in Southern California on their business cards, it says, we do, koi injections. And I'm like, bro, you can't fucking say that on your card. I mean, are you a vet? No, you're not a vet. You can't say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
that kind of stuff should be on the down low. I mean, I'm glad they do. I'm really glad they do, because you can't just toddle into any old vet and they'll give your fish a shot. So I'm glad that they're available by whatever means. But yeah, you got to be careful about that practice of veterinary medicine thing.
Yeah.
So to avoid that, people have done a whole bunch of different things. Like sometimes this happens. People will sell the collection to the person attempting to treat them. So they will sell all the fish to that person so that ostensibly they're treating their own fish, which has a tendency to bypass a lot of different regulations in that regard. Right. And then at the conclusion of that, they will sell the fish back for a number that just happens to equal what the cost of treatment was. And so, which is really a good return on investment. If you buy a collection of fish for $1 and you can sell it back for $600, that's always a good deal. Yeah. But so that's a way around it. The real problem is rendering a diagnosis, and then a treatment is the practice of veterinary medicine. So the way you're doing it actually is right. If you see a group of fish going through something, whether you can say it's a bacterial ulcer disease and you think that there's a co-infection with ick and flukes, let's say, and you have a pretty good idea that that's the case, you could just skip all that and just say, well, if it was me, I would use medicated food and API's general cure, right? Yeah. So you're not making a diagnosis, but you know what you're looking at. So it's kind of like fisheries biologists. They're not actually veterinarians, but they know everything and more than a veterinarian would know. So they can safely say, well, this is what people are doing about this, or this is what's in this or that book about treating this particular problem or whatever. So those are what I like to tell people that are interested in this kind of work. I like to tell people it's you're making observations, but not a diagnosis. Like you can say your pond, we found Kilodinella. When we did microscopic biopsies on your fish, we found Kilodinella. And it's funny, you stagger into trouble when you say your fish are dying because of the Kilodinella. Versus if you just said, we were doing a biological assessment, we found Kilodinella, this is typically how that's treated. Not necessarily this is how you should treat your fish, I will render this treatment. So it's subtleties. Right. But it's funny how people will twist that knife in your back, though, because if you help them out, and you're not a veterinarian, and the fish die, because sometimes even with the best of treatment, they do die. And the fish die, and all of a sudden they're like, I could hold him over a barrel for practicing veterinary medicine. Mm-hmm. And then they go, I think I'd like you to replace all my fish. I will not. Yes, you will, or you'll be answering to the board. Yeah. So you got to be careful about that. But I don't discourage anybody from helping. But I appreciate the way you do it. Framing things and basically this is what I would do if they were mine.
This is something that I found, and I know Leslie will kind of back me on this. She probably has a story or two, but oftentimes I can make an assessment about a pond, right? And then this is what I would do. I can come by, I can look at them and, and go over your system for life support. But this is the direction I would take. A lot of times I can do that over the phone. Seeing a video, and I could just say like, well, this would be an approach I would just go right away with. And then I'd be like, water change, salt, like your shotgun style approach on something. And then, you're like, hey, that's about $1,000 worth of stuff or whatever. Or I can come and perform the water change for you if you want, and I can fix life support, do that. It's $3,000 to, perform that service. And then you can treat with this, this, and this, and report back to me, and I can help you. And they're like, $3,000? What are you talking about? $3,000? That's so much money. And be like, okay, well, you just said those fish are 12 years old and they mean the world to you. And like, do you want to fix them or not? Like, that's what it's going to take. And I'm not, it's not like I'm gouging them to like, that's what it would cost to do it, right?
Hmm.
I didn't go, oh, that there's, that fish are 12 years old. I'm going to mark this up. But they just think that that number is outrageous. But if it was a dog, I know a lady across the street, she spent 13 grand on her dog to get, some treatment, parvo or whatever.
Sure. But isn't everything results oriented? Like when you buy a car, you might pay a tremendous amount, but you get to go 128 miles an hour. Or you spend $3,000 on some guy, and one way or the other, all your fish live, you know?
Yeah.
So it depends on the outcome. If you're able to deliver on success, hell yeah. And then they have to decide what's that worth. I mean, some of these fish, like a decent size, 24 to 30 inch, I don't know, Kiatsuri or Hiatsuri, my favorites, or a Chagoe Isuri. Um, those things, they're worth $3,000. I mean, everything else is ancillary. And sometimes the best value that a person gets, honestly, especially if you're an educator, and I can tell that you are because you do all the pond digger stuff and you're educating on YouTube and everything else. The best part of your $3,000 ticket, if that's what it is the protection of the other fish subsequent to that. Is that no matter what happens to the fish that actually drew your attention to it, that you teach them so many things about everything that they don't lose any more fish. Like they know, okay, well, this is what we do when the fish are sick or whatever.
Mhm.
And they have somebody to reach out to when a fish that's worth $2,000 gets sick. So I would have to say that that's entirely worth it. And functioning as an advisor in that regard, not necessarily as a veterinarian, but as an advisor that kind of deals with big picture environmental issues, big picture husbandry issues, and that sort of thing, and then recommending treatments that are based on standard of care around that, worth it, worth it. So, and I'm sure you get that feedback from your customers. Saved all my fish, and glad to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have anything about that you want to touch on? No? And some of the things it's labor to the site. It's, some risk involved with it, but I'm like, well, you can do it yourself. I can teach you how to do it. Just get it.
right.
Well, no, I'm old. I can't do it. Okay, well then I'm sorry, but it's $3,000 for us to do it. Oh, that's too much money. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? Is this just a rescue mission now? A mercy mission? It's terrible. I really struggle with that.
I don't know what to tell you in that regard. I don't. I don't know because you're right. I mean, the information is out there. You could literally, when they say, $3,000, what the hell are you talking about? You could like hold up these two books and you could say, you could do like this and you could go, hey, how about reading those and wade in the
Yeah,
pond? You will save everything. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And it's kind of like, all right, what's it worth to have somebody who knows what they're doing execute on this shit? These guys already read these, know what
mhm,
they're doing, and can save my fish for $3,000. Then they got this simple math.
right.
So you've
Well,
been out there doing this for a long time. How do they know though that you're like, how do they know that you're ready? Like I would trust you absolutely. Like if I was somewhere else and my fish got sick, I'd be like, I don't know, is Erik Triplett around? And send him out. I don't
yeah.
care, whatever. I wouldn't worry about it. But how do those people know not to worry about it? Like how do you project the competence? How do you bring that?
I mean, part of it is when they're asking the questions in the first place, right? Answer the questions with knowledge
Yeah,
and
right.
reputation too. I mean, if they say, well, how did this happen? How did this happen? And I can go, we just had a place call from up the street the other day, and he said, something's wrong with my trout. And I said, okay, well, trout are riverine. They want the water moving. They need it to be cold. They need lots of oxygen. And he said, oh,
Y-
those three things are what's not right in my pond. I can tell you that right now. And so then he was like, now what do I do? So, I mean, that was it. Before he even said what was wrong with the fish, I said, this is what you need. Is that happening? And he said, no. And he's like, that's exactly what's wrong with them. So,
I've been doing this for a long time and I've never heard anybody try and trout in a pond. Were they in a pond or a raceway or what were they? What
No,
the hell,
they're
man?
fine. Their pond. We're at we're at 3,300 feet where we're at in the mountains, like in the foothills, and they're up at around probably 4,300, maybe, yeah, 4,500 feet. And the pond, it's a little shallow, but it's a lot cooler up there. The
Huh.
pond's only like 4 feet. They've had them for a season, but yeah, they were in trouble. But there's the thing, like we talked to them. I'm like, they're close, and I'm like, I'm on my way, right? I'm coming up there, right? I go up,
Right, right, right.
and I'm like, look, see how these fish are labored breathing, their mouths moving like this. I'm like, that's a sign they need oxygen, that we need more air. And they're like, oh, and the other fish aren't doing it. These fish are doing it. They're like, okay, I see what you're telling me. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, I'm like, 50% water change, just like this book said, 50% water change. And let's crank the air in this thing. Like, let's crank it. And, $2,000 system of aeration, and boom, they have this. It's a good sized pond. It's
Yeah,
not deep as I would like, but, we cranked with aeration. All the fish are alive today. It's like,
absolutely. What kind of trout were they?
they're rainbow. And
Rainbow trout.
yeah, and I told them too, I was like, and they fish out of there. It's like a venue where you go and you can fish.
It's like a little tourist town, so you can
Oh, so he's not a pet guy.
Yeah,
He's not like trying to raise rainbow trout in a 1,500-gallon backyard pond with a spitter.
right.
Okay.
So it's probably, I don't know, it's probably a 16 to 20,000 gallon pond. It's a good sized pond.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, aeration, absolutely. Good call.
Although literally up the street, we have another client that has trout in a pond that he's just raising trout in his yard.
All right. Well, good luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're what they're accustomed to as far as oxygen tensions are almost impossible to accomplish in warm water. So I would have thought you had to have a chiller.
Well,
So,
here.
Well, there are ponds locally here that are down a little bit more, but they're like 30 feet deep, and that they have their regional parks and they stock those. But I mean, at 30 foot deep, you have a little bit of stability of temperature in the bottom.
absolutely. You got 55 degrees down at the bottom. So yeah.
Well, hey, listen, I want to jump on. We still have some listeners on. We've been on for an hour. If I just want to throw this out there, if you guys have some comments. Oh shoot, we got some people on here. Okay, I'm gonna start doing some questions here. We got Michael Northway, Eric Twig is in the house. We got Vela Aquatics, Joe Butler, my buddy's been in here. So if you guys want to ask some questions, you guys can throw it out there and we'll get Eric to answer them. We won't keep him on all night. So go ahead, shoot away, and we'll get you a saving sick fish. As long as you ask a good question, Twig Northway. But gosh, tell us about what you want to do in the future. You have some other plans. You have other books that are coming up, right?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Saving sick fish is a precursor because it's an area that I have some expertise in, and over the years I've picked up kind of what a beginner would really need to know in 40 pages, right? And I've said that before. I want to write another one called Saving Sick Dogs, coming again from 30 years of experience with that, and again 40 pages to try to keep it brief. That a person could read 40 pages on saving sick dogs and know like ostensibly the top 40 things that are going to happen to the dog, like ear infections. Your dog's had an ear infection. Everybody's dog gets an ear infection sooner or later. So that would be saving sick dogs. And then I want to do saving sick cats. And then I want to do like saving sick pets, which is a pocket pet type book, white tree frogs and stuff like that. And then that's it, because I don't know anything about birds. There will be no saving sick birds. But that's kind of the goal, is sort of, I want a series of books as I face retirement. I would like to write a series of books like that and then support those books, client outreach, chances to influence the beginner market and that sort of thing. Partly money, of course. Can't do anything for free, especially as you face retirement. But really to try to smooth the entry of the beginners into these hobbies and into taking care of their dogs. A big part of the Saving Sick Dogs book is going to be questions to ask the vet when you go to the emergency clinic. And I think that's where people really get to their heads start swimming when they're dealing with stuff and they go to the emergency room and they don't know what to ask. And under those circumstances, a lot of times they'll spend thousands without realizing that it's over.
What about food? How much of saving sick dogs has to do with their diet, do you think?
A ton. And the trick on that is going to be, all right, Erik, you got 40 pages. How are you going to pick up nutrition? Like, so you can't talk about formulations. You'd have to talk about the influence of nutrition, the value of certain proteins, the hypoallergenicity of certain things, the impact of, say, grain-free or something. Then you'd have to use, and here we go back to saving sick fish, you have to use QR codes to take it to the next level. So then it'd be like, all right, if you want to talk about hypoallergenicity and the experience of complete proteins in the colon, read this QR code, and then you could take it to the next level. So that's kind of the goal. And thank you for that question, Erik. It's basically, I'm looking at a series of books that try to break everything down to 40 pages, and then can take it to the next level if you want to through QR codes and videos and seminars and stuff like that. But that for the person who really needs help, they're sitting in the emergency room with their cat. And the question is to ask, how did they end up there? What's going on? Is it just hairballs? Should you get up and go home? So that would be I'm hoping that's kind of the future for me, is being able to just do some nice, easy, emotionally fulfilling outreach. So
I think that's a good place to be. And I think how you broke it down is very good, because for me, reading this book, I'm just going to talk to all the dumb contractors out there, because I'm one. I can do that. Like, this book, it's a great read. I learned so much from it, but it's pretty deep. It's pretty hard. And this one just breaks it down so simply. And one of the things that I've done is I have studied personality profiles, just so I can understand personality types, the A, B, or whatever, or DISC profile. And I've been studying Enneagram personality types, which is, it's very textbook. Like, if you go into it, it's very lots of psychology. You got these big old textbooks. I'm like, oh my God, I can't handle this right now, right? But they made this dumb contractor book.
It's like this version of.
It's like Enneagram. This version of the Enneagram, and I know Enneagram right now. Like, I can talk that. I can push my array around. I mean, I know there's a lot more I can learn because I haven't gone into the textbook part of it. I really understand, personalities 1 through 9 and how they think and what they need out of life. I know how to do that now, and so this book is doing that. And I think with all the books out there on dogs and cats and what have you talked about, it's almost prerequisite. If you get a dog, just read this. You'll learn about hairballs. You'll learn about why they throw up. You learn about that stuff.
Yep.
Learn a little bit about nutrition.
That's my goal.
I got a couple questions, and I do want to talk about nutrition and dogs, so let's answer some questions. I got Richard Jeffrey on, and he says in 10 years he's had his pond. We built the pond for him 10 years ago. He's never tested for pH, but from the discussion, it seems important, and he wants to know if it's something that he should start to do after 10 years.
Okay. 2 pieces to that answer. Is it important? Yes. Crazy important for a lot of people. Keep in mind, he's had his pond for 10 years and everything's going great, right? So for him, it's not that important, because obviously if he's done great for 10 years, he doesn't have a pH problem, really. And the reason for that is, if you put in an ecosystem pond for him, right? Would that be the case? See, the ecosystem, so the ecosystem pond has crap tons of gravel and boulders and rock and all kinds of different carbonate donors. So the thing that supports pH is carbonates. That's practically calcium and baking soda that's in a lot of the rocks. So when you put his pond in, you basically built his pH buffer into the pond. That's kind of one of the things that the gravel and the waterfall and the boulders and all that stuff do. So the 10 years of success answer the question to say, dude, don't even worry about your pH. You've been 10 years successful. Your pH is fine. And then if he was like, well, why is my pH fine? I'd be like, probably the rocks on the side of the pond, because they donate the carbonates necessary to hold that pH where it needs to be. So for that guy, probably Nothing to worry about. For the beginner hobbyist, especially in a fish tank or in a clean liner pond where there's nothing donating carbonates, yeah, probably they should be testing the pH.
That's a great answer. And let me give a little context to Richard. He's based in the Coachella Valley, and really high pH comes straight out of the tap. So I mean, we're talking 8.2 to 8.5. You know, is just normal out of the hose, right? So when he's doing small water changes and servicing, he's getting that natural buffer from his water changes, and it's top
Absolutely.
in the desert.
So
great question, Richard.
In Nevada, I used to do a fish health seminar in Reno, and that's where I started fielding those questions, because down in Georgia, the water's really soft. It comes out of clay, but up in Reno, it comes out of limestone aquifer. Like everything underground is all limestone. So their water comes out of the taps as hard as a rock. And so, yeah, they're having the same thing as in Coachella. He's got dream water coming out.
Yeah.
And going into a pond that probably naturally supports that pH. So, yeah, forget it. You don't have to worry about it, buddy.
Great stuff. Okay, Joe the fish guy, Joe Butler, he wants to know, what's your favorite fish?
The chagoy atsuri. You hardly ever see them. So you know what a chagoy is? It's the brown or cinnamon colored fish with the black the lines on it, and then it has black blotches on it. So it's a chagoy with black blotches. They're just stupid rare. And when you see one, it's like, wow. And sometimes people know what they got, right? So they're like, oh, that's $2,400. I'm like, that's your fish forever. And then other times they're like, oh, that ugly one? And you're like, yeah, you should put it in my car right now. You know, so I like hiatsuri and kiatsuri. They're also very beautiful, but chatsuri are just stupid, rare, and crazy. And then there's another one. If people haven't seen this, it's a karasugoi. It's basically a black koi.
Yeah.
And they even make, and this is the rarity, this is the holy grail of some fish, if you're into that, is the karasugoi butterfly scaleless. They have a skin. They don't have scales. They have a skin, and they're black. They're black as pitch, and they have these really long fins. And so you grow them out to like 30-something inches, and then at feeding time, they come up, and they're like Dementors from Harry Potter. They come up, and they're just like, what the hell was that? You know? Oh, that's my 32-inch karasugoi doitsu.
Wait, what are the ones in the Lord of the Rings, those guys?
Dementors.
Oh, okay.
I have
Lord of the Rings? I don't know what those guys. What Lord of the Rings?
Harry Potter.
Oh, Lord of the
Rings.
The
ring wraiths.
The
ring wraiths. Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking? Yeah, that's a karasugoi butterfly.
Yeah.
We have a little black chicken, and her name's Karasa.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. Yep.
Okay, Denise Culver wants to know, can she treat koi pox in her pond? She wants to know if it can be fixed with heating the water. Or was it the other disease? So you can answer that question.
So that's koi pox?
Yes, koi pox. She wants to know if she can treat it with just heating the water, or is that another disease?
So, all right, the answer to that is kind of tricky. So it's cart pox, and it causes the lesions that you're seeing on the fish, the little droplets of either they're pigmented like the fish in their droplets, or they're actually white, waxy looking droplets on the fish's skin. That's cart pox. The transmissibility of that is pretty weak. Doesn't transmit very easily. But if somebody told me like, oh, all my fish are worth $70,000, I'd be like, well, then you got to get rid of that one, because he's got a 5% chance of transmitting it to your other fish. But for the average hobbyist, they're like, what, 95% chance that nobody's going to get it, and they'll keep it, right? But the thing about cart pox is it's immune system dependent. So like when the fish are really warm, they don't show those symptoms. But when they're cold during the winter and all the way up through early spring, they'll show these lesions, and then they'll shed the lesions in the summertime when their immune system is peaked. I don't know that we have a cure for that, although I think one of these days we will, because we'll start using NAC or even NAD or vitamin C in koi, but we're years away from doing any of that. But right now, using heat to treat carp pox, pretty much all you got. So to answer your question, yeah, that's the way to do it. There's no medicine that fixes it. And keeping the fish is only risking 5% chance of transmission to other fish.
But also time frame just does it too, right? If you just wait till summer, then it warms up enough to where.
Yeah. As soon as they get warm, they're good. I wouldn't, and the thing is, like, if you heat the fish in the wintertime, it's just going to get cold again. And it gets cold again, then the carp pox lesions will reappear. I would consider it currently an incurable, but we'll probably, with any luck, we'll figure out a way to get the immune system to peak against that and actually cure it. And that may come from one of the giant antioxidant therapies that's coming along here shortly. And the ability to put all that cool stuff in food might make it actually possible for us to do something like that. But
Wow.
when are those studies going to happen? Like,
Right.
who's going to do those studies, right? So I don't know.
Denise says the symptoms didn't go away in the summer heat, so it must not be carp pox. However, she's very well shaded. Her pond doesn't get a lot of sun, and she's in San Diego, so it's I mean, she's in Escondido, so she does get warm, but not quite as she would more inland. And she's fairly well shaded, completely shaded, if I'm not mistaken. So she might not.
Okay, so she's all right. She said that during the summer the pond got warm, and that didn't fix it, so it must not be carp pox.
Yes.
You have to just say the pond got warm during the summer, it didn't go away, so it might not be carp pox. And I would be with her on that. I'd be like, it kind of sounds like it might be something else. And they are prone to certain kinds of skin cancers, which are actually, to a certain extent, treatable.
Okay. All right. And then, so here's an interesting question from Steve Wilson. He's wanted to build an outdoor cichlid pond next to his koi pond. He's in Phoenix. Is it possible to successfully keep cichlids outdoors year round? He would love tips.
Yes, it is possible. But, and you know this as well as I do, you're going to have to heat them. I mean, I don't know what the prevailing temperatures are during the winter in Arizona and how it fluctuates from day to night, because some of those just desert environments can be toasty in the daytime and then go to like 10 at night. They do that in Reno.
Mm-hmm.
So you know as well as I do, Eric, that if he wants to do African cichlids or some kind of cichlids outside, he's going to have to keep them uniformly warm. But putting them outside, dude,
really cool.
If he builds a pond or something, like I don't know, does like I saw one on YouTube. The guy had done like 2,000 gallons or something. He throws the fish in there, these Malawans and Tanganyika fish and all that, and they're swimming around like they're back in Africa.
Yeah.
So cool. So yeah, dude, do it. Build you a pond and heat it during the winter. You just have to maintain a stable temperature for them.
Yeah, I'll throw a couple things in there. So I understand Phoenix fairly well. The heat, if I'm not mistaken, 17 or 19 degrees, they might drop to in the winter. It's a pretty cold winter for them. So yeah, you're definitely going to have to handle that. I've seen some really cool situations with cichlids in Palm Springs. I've seen some really cool outdoor fish. They struggle in the winter, of course, but I did see some African cichlids. I want to say Pseudotrophius solosi in Long Beach, California, over winter in Long Beach, California, which blew my mind by a very skilled hobbyist. He did it out there, but I don't think he did any crazy stuff for the temperatures. But I'll tell you this, Steve, small greenhouse over it in the wintertime. I know that's kind of a pain in the ass, but that is how a lot of these higher end koi people do it. Like in Chicago, they want to keep their pond, stable around 50-ish or maybe 45. They'll put a greenhouse over the pond. One other thing I'll throw in there I've been playing with for about 4 years now is a cichlid from Uruguay. Okay, so I have a fish I've been working with about 4 years. It's an Astriolosis, if I remember that correctly. It's a very cool fish. I've kept it outdoors. We're in Cherry Valley. We get down to 19 degrees, just like Phoenix. And we get about 100 max where we're at. But I've kept this fish outdoors over ice, 30-degree water, 32-degree water, like real cold. And they've made it over the winter here in Cherry Valley. So they're not like an African, they're not like a Mbuna that you're going to get from Lake Malawi, but it's a very cool fish. Is it not a cool fish?
Yeah, and they still have that cool cichlid shape, and they still have some color. They're just not like some of those. There's no electric blue or anything like that, but they're still cool.
Yeah, they're I mean, when they're spawning, brilliant yellow, black barring, very cool, very cool fish. So Steve, hit me up.
And if this outdoor system he's talking about is 1,000 gallons or less, you could heat that economically.
Yeah,
you know? I don't know that you could heat 5,000 gallons,
true.
But you could do 300-watt heaters in 1,000 gallons and get away with it, probably, unless you're going against a gradient like Canada.
Right.
Yeah, and your greenhouse idea is brilliant because that would make everything easier.
One other thing that you can do on a really cold night, like in Phoenix, if we're still talking about that area, I was going to say, like in the winter environment, if you're going to have a really cold night, what I would recommend is if you can have some kind of greenhouse structure over it, still might get a little cold in there, but you can, if you do have some heaters in there in the water, then you can throw styrofoam on top of the water, as long as you have good aeration coming up through the middle, so you don't, lose atmospheric release, right? And I wouldn't put styrofoam over the complete pond. If it was a perfect square, you could probably do that, and then it would probably be a bad idea. But if you leave some openings on the sides where air can exchange, that'll probably be really helpful. But the Uruguay cichlids, there's a lot of different varieties that you can find online. The species that I got just came out on the latest cichlid news. So if you're watching this and you type in cichlid news, Uruguay cichlid, I think it was the April edition that came out. The fish is on the cover of Cichlid News magazine, so it's really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so, and a quick little story behind that, my dear friend, one of my mentors in fish keeping, he brought those fish home like they were, I don't know, half an inch. He brought them home from Uruguay like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. And they were the first of its kind in America. He bred them and then kept them outdoors in his pond. So it's been really, really cool. And so I guess there are some other species of that. Astrolaheros. Is that what I said earlier? Astrolaheros is the name. It's not what I said. That's the name, Astrolaheros. And there's probably like maybe several different species that are coming in. And when the one that I came in that I have, they first were called species Rocha. And then they've recently changed them. So, and then they called them species locale for a while as well. Those were the two names. And then just on the cover of Cichlid News, I don't have that book and I don't have that magazine in stock yet, but they've officially named it. Paul Loisel did a whole article on them and identified them and have them out there. So, but anyway, Steve, if you want to try some of those, hit me up and I can probably connect you on that. So I'm going to speak for Dr. J here, and I'm going to make a note here. Joe Fish, we're going to send you a Saving Sick Fish book. Denise Culver, we're going to send you a book. And Steve Wilson, I'm going to send you a book. I'm giving away a bunch of your books. You were gone so long, I just started giving away books.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Son of a bitch, walked away from the camera. All right. So we're giving away books. Now, how did you give away books? Did they answer a question good?
Yeah, these are.
Did they just guess a number?
No, this like the questions that are coming in. Richard Jeffries, I just appreciate it. I know I talked your ear off asking questions. These guys hung out long enough to hear me ask you all these questions. So
right.
Your way. So
I figure if they're still on the podcast at this point,
yeah,
they should get a book.
Yeah, you said I could give away 5, so I'm giving away 5. Okay, so
do it.
I do have another question from, and you better sign these ones. Will you at least sign these?
Well, if I know who they're to.
Okay, I'll get you the list. I got the list.
You know what I'm going to sign them? I'm going to sign them as, I met your girlfriend. She was really cute. And then their wives are going to read this. So, right? Oh, my God. Who is that? What? Or, hey, Jamie, who is the girl you were with? They're getting so much trouble.
Okay, I got one.
I won't.
And you wonder why you've been divorced 3 times. Jesus.
Right?
Okay.
I got to. All right. I hope I get time to tell you the story about that. Just remind me about the married 3 times thing. I want to tell you why Bree is not marrying me right away.
Okay. Well, let's get one more question for fish.
Yeah.
Then we can
I'm
dig in
good.
a little bit. Kevin Davis wants to know, do you recommend feeding antibiotic food while you have fish in quarantine? As it sounds like the fish are not sick, but he just purchased them.
That's a good question. There's 3 parts to that answer. One part is if you're in retail and you've got thousands of dollars worth of fish stacked up on the front end on that, I probably would. And then the second piece would be if you got the fish from like an unknown source, like you're like, I don't know, these fish, like somebody's selling them right off the plane from Japan, probably would. But let's say you're buying the fish from somebody who's had them for 2 weeks already and they quarantine them, they treat them good. You can see they're coming out of good water and all that. Probably not. They don't hit antibiotic enriched food as well as they would hit regular food because it tastes weird. And I honestly think those people, like small residential purchasers, probably going from good water with a quarantine retailer to their pond with good water and a decent quarantine, would probably do better feeding just a high quality food with krill.
Okay, let me pause you there. First of all, it's Kelvin. My old eyes didn't read very well. I'm reading my phone over here. He says they're specifically imports from Japan. I'm assuming they're koi. So let's dive into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, fresh off the plane, or have they been held by somebody for a couple weeks?
Good question. If they've been through quarantine at a facility already, and then now,
yeah,
that's a good question. Build on both of them. If you don't
okay,
mind.
so let's say that you're buying from somebody that held them for 3 weeks or more, or like somebody who's really good. There's some guys in this industry that are freaking amazing. Am I allowed even to name them?
Yeah,
Really?
absolutely.
Okay, Kodama.
Mm-hmm.
You buy Kodama fish. Like I would buy a Kodama fish, and I'd be like, Taro, did you quarantine it? Are you pretty good on the KHV? And if he was like, yeah, I'd be like, great. I'd throw it right in my pond.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that guy, he's amazing. So, or if you're getting them from somebody else, and I'm not knocking them, but if they're selling them right off the plane or whatever, yeah, I would probably do an antibiotic enriched food. Those fish have been through hell. And up in Nevada, they don't see germs. You know what I mean? Like they're being raised in the Alps, like Pollyanna, like, oh, what's a germ?
Yeah.
And then they come down here. And so probably, yeah, right off the plane, I probably would treat them with an antibiotic enriched food. But, something from somebody that's triaging them for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever and says, yeah, they're quarantined, they look great. I'd probably go with that, not feed an antibiotic enriched food. And then you'd be like, well, why would you not feed an antibiotic enriched food? It really has to do with like knocking down their own indigenous germs. Like I'd kind of want to leave the natural biota in those fish with those fish. Like I wouldn't want to change anything. I wouldn't want to put anything in the environment that kills beneficial germs. And a lot of the fish just don't need that. I'd rather them hit something that's a high protein fish meal, shrimp meal, and krill and just eat real good, as opposed to an antibiotic enriched food that they're like, fine, I'll eat it. And they only eat a little. And it's got an antibiotic in it, and you're like, yay, but they're only eating a little. It's better to get them to eat a lot than to eat a little antibiotic enriched. So that's a long answer.
Question. That's a good answer. Thanks for the question, Kelvin. Okay, I got a controversial question right here. Are you ready for that?
Sure.
Yeah, Doreen wants to know, is adding any bacteria to a pond from a bottle, is it a scam?
No, it's not a scam. It's just not as good as naturally occurring bacteria. No, it's not a scam. So let's just pretend that everybody was absolutely face value, trying as hard as they could. Anybody putting a germs in a bottle at the best they could do, they could go, all right, these are beneficial species of germs. We're going to put them in a bottle. We're going to do the best we can to get as many live germs to your pond as possible. And they do a pretty good job of it. So I don't want to throw all of those bottle germs out like they're better than nothing by far. But half the germs they put in the bottle are dead. Not right then, but they die in the bottle. The rest of them lyophilize. Um, they're not even putting in half of the stuff that actually purifies water because they can't. You can't just like bottle ambifera. Um, so they're better than nothing. So I don't want to use scam as a term, but better than necessarily like just going out and actually bioseeding from natural squeezins from uh, so like Erik Triplett, he's got ponds and stuff, and he's got these filters, and there's germs and beneficial bacteria in those filters, right? So like you could go out and squeeze stuff out of the media in those filters into a bucket for that lady, and it would be twice as good as anything she could buy in a bottle, right? So you have to throw away scam as a term because they're not useless, but they're nowhere near as good as what you'd get from biomedia. Or if you didn't have biomedia and you just went out to a lake or a river and you got some mud and pine straw and just from the side of the pond, just the stuff that tries to slip between your fingers, it's not sand, it's not rocks. It's like just that goo. And you put it in a 5-gallon bucket and you stir it up, got sound effects, and you stir it up and you take that water and you just cup the water into the system and that bioseeds. And it gives you more than just bacteria that you could put in a bottle. It gives you ambifera, it gives you bacteriophages, it gives you the hytoxia or something. They're flagellates that eat bacteria. I published an article on savingsickfish.org, and it talks about cloudy water, but it kind of dives kind of deep into the 5 different things that keep your water clear. And you can't put them in a bottle. So to answer her question, there's no short answers with me. So to answer her question, they're not really a scam. They're better than nothing. They can only bottle the bacteria, which means they're missing 3 or 4 other things that contribute to water clarity and cycling the system. And if bioseeding by far is better than a bottle, but if you only have a bottle, or what if you live in Manhattan? What are you going to like run out to the creek by your house? So yeah, you use the bottle.
So her main thing is, she realizes bacteria need oxygen, and in a bottle there's no oxygen. So that's what she's
right. So what they do is there's a couple things they do. They take, let's just say you took 100 bacteria. All right. The numbers are different, but let's say you took 100 bacteria and you wanted to put it in a bottle. So what you do is you put a little bit of anesthetic in there, and you put something in there that causes the bacteria to lyophilize, which means they put on their biohazard suit. Half of the bacteria can't figure out how to do any of that crap, and they die. So you put 100 germs in there, and 50 of them are going to die in the bottle on the way to her. The other 50 of them are going to put on a biohazard suit, and their metabolism is going to be slowed down by what they do to them in the bottle. So 50 of them are going to get to her house. So they do stuff. And if she wants to, Google it up, it's called lyophilize, is the way bacteria protect themselves against dying in a bottle like that. It's like, oh, no oxygen, then lyophilize, and they put on biohazard suits, and they can be like that for like 2 years. It's amazing, really. So that's kind of what they do. So there should be a shelf date on any germs that she buys. There needs to be a shelf date on there. And if there's no shelf date on there, then you're kind of looking at something that actually rhymes with scam.
Hey, listen, do you remember when we had him out in 2002, 2003? Every time we was asked a question, he would say, yes and no. Let me explain the 3-part reason why.
Yep.
And I say, this incredibly smart person once told me the answer to every question is yes or no. And I've yet to disprove him.
Yep. Yep. Because there's always variables, especially in fish health. It's very interesting. And the reason yes and no is always going to qualify is because there's a difference between the way you treat your fish at retail and the way you treat your fish in residential environments. Because in residential, you just impulse purchase koi, which, by the way, is the only way to buy good koi is impulse. results, right? You just see that thing and you're just like, oh my God, And so you can impulse purchase koi and take them home and you treat them a certain way. But versus retail where you're mandatory, you're just constantly bringing in new waves of disease. Like you're just getting a shipment in of this, just getting a shipment in of that. You treat the fish different. So yeah, there's a yes and a no to every question.
Mm-hmm. So I've had a couple questions about over aerating your pond. Is it possible to over aerate your pond?
Yes. 2 answers to that question.
Only 2, not 3. That's good.
Right. So you can't over aerate to the point of gas bubble disease. I don't know if anybody, that's what they're worried about is gas bubble disease, where there's so much air going into the system under compression that it actually causes bubbles to form in the fish's bloodstream. That's not likely to happen because of anything you do. It can happen naturally in algae systems in broad daylight, very rare. The only way to over aerate would actually be if you're aerating so hard that the fish can't rest. Like you've got 3 stones in 300 gallons and they are going crazy on some kind of regenerative blower. And there's no place for the fish not to have to swim all the time. And so they're just like, there's no way to rest because if they stop flapping their fins, they're going to like drift off into the main system or whatever. That's over aeration. Past that, as far as over mixing, degassing, too much oxygen, too much carbon dioxide blowing off, or any of those types of things, it's not going to happen. So, yeah, that's a good question. I am a big fan of aeration. If I wanted to talk about all the benefits of high aeration with air stones and a good regenerative blower, it would take an hour to talk to you about disruption of surface tension, degassing carbon dioxide and the effects of pH, the expulsion of minerals and general hardness, calcium and stuff that precipitates on the sides of the tank when you over aerate. There's no issue with over aeration, but the concept of aeration bears mentioning that you really need to aerate, and it's a common beginner problem. The first thing anybody that is having aquarium problems should do is drop in an air stone. That's going to fix 1/3 of it. Mm-hmm. So that's a good question.
Yeah. And interesting. So like Richard wanted to know that as well as Doreen. I think Doreen's maybe in like San Diego area where it's nice and like the weather's cool. I could be wrong there, but Richard for a fact is in Palm Springs area. So I mean, he's in the Coachella Valley, so you can't over aerate when it's 120 out, right?
No,
no.
Holy crap! Yeah, those guys down in Arizona. Coachella's in Arizona.
No, it's in Southern California.
Yeah. I found out that people are keeping koi at 110 degrees in Arizona years and years and years ago. And I was like, oh my God, how do they do that? I mean, it's just aeration and shade, It's crazy keeping fish over 100 degrees.
So this is interesting. So in a Coachella Valley, this has been a while, but we had a lot of ponds in that area. But I remember one pond, it was a crazy year. It was like 124. It was a really, really hot summer. And one of our clients' ponds, the fish stopped eating and the water temperature was, oh, I thought my dog got out. The water temperature hit like 99 or 100. It was like, that was the breaking point where the fish were like, we're not eating anymore. It's too hot. We had to get shade cloths up and over and like cool the pond down. But that was a scary time. And I can't believe it's only happened to us once in my career. Yeah.
100 degree water. I just couldn't believe it. Hey, you want to know how 100 degree water, did I lose sound? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you too. It's just weird. I'll tell you how Arizona's hot water matters. This was groundbreaking stuff. And I'll try to keep it brief. It has to do with koi herpes virus. Some of you guys already know this story. All right, so koi herpes virus is this virus. It came from Japan/Israel, And those guys are pointing fingers at each other. They're like, no, you caused it. And the Israelis are like, no, you caused it. And just whatever. So it came from these two different places. And so koi herpes virus came along. And koi herpes virus, when it gets in the fish, kills a lot of them, like 90+% of them. Well, there was this batch of fish up in the northeastern United States, let's say New York. I don't know if it was New York or Michigan, who cares, whatever. It's the Northeast. And it was a koi show, and everybody bought koi from there. And then everybody got koi herpes virus. So their fish were dying like crazy. And the message boards at the time were lighting up like, oh my God, Joe just lost all his fish. And they were starting to figure out it was a virus. So then they looked at where these people went. And a lot of people bought fish up in the Northeast, and they went back to California and all their fish died. And these people went from New York all the way over to here, and their fish died. And all these people had come up from Arizona, none of their fish died. Like, we were reaching out to them going, oh my God, I saw you bought 1,600 fish from New York with the, that koi show. And they're like, what are you talking about? Hey, everybody's fine. They're all just great.
Yeah.
Their water was like 80 something degrees down there. So they're just everybody in the southeastern United States at that point that took fish home from that show with the koi herpes virus were dumping them into their ponds at 800 degrees, and nothing happened to any of them as far as koi herpes virus. Everybody else went home to 70 to 80, and the koi herpes virus just ate. So that was the first hint we got that heat controls koi herpes virus. And then the Israelis came over and they gave a seminar, and I was there. Kotler and all those guys were showing the capsid is made of wax, and when it gets warm enough, the virus capsid breaks down. So that virus has a real hard time at high temperatures, blah, blah, blah. They deny saying that now. But with koi herpes virus, if you heat them up, it stops the virus and the fish survive. And we only know that because when you take koi herpes virus fish to Arizona, or I guess Coachella, and they're real hot, it fixes it. So that's the reason that Arizona means so much to me when I think about 110-degree fish, is because those guys are practically koi herpes virus immune, at least at those temperatures.
Wow.
So aeration is critical. It's like keeping trout anywhere. You got to keep them aerated.
There was an important question that came through here. This was back to the bacteria. So it says about the bacteria. So do they do the same thing about when they put their biohazard suits on, like you were saying? Do they do the same thing when you turn your bead filter off? Like you turn the bead filter off, do they just all go into that suspension state? Talk about that.
No, sadly, that's not the case. Oh, my God. One time. Right? It's kind of like, okay, kids, gather around. Once upon a time, some bead filters went off, 2 bead filters in the system, and they had gone off during the summertime. And they had gone off and they were down for 3 or 4 days. This is kind of my fault. They went down for 3 or 4 days, and the fish got sick as a result of that. Dissolved oxygen in the pond drastically declined and all that other stuff. And for whatever reason, it never occurred to me to tell the owners, hey, by the way, when you start your bead filters up, the first water that comes out of there is going to be anaerobic, which means inside that filter, there's no oxygen. And so some of the germs aren't ready to handle that. They just die. And then a few of those germs are kind of like, yeah, no problem. We don't need oxygen. We're going to metabolize sulfur. And so they reduce sulfur. And when they do that, they produce hydrogen sulfide, which is a noxious gas. And it doesn't take much. It's like nerve gas to koi. It just totally F's them up. And so, I don't know, we're looking at the fish and we're like, oh, increase aeration, all that other stuff. And then they turn the bead filters back on. And all of a sudden, we traded one problem for another in a hurry. And they ended up with hydrogen sulfide issues. So when a bead filter cuts off, to answer your question, when some of these filtration systems cut off for a couple days, not just 6 hours, that's fine. 12 hours, fine. 24 hours, fine. But 3 days, you're going to get anaerobic germs going crazy, making hydrogen sulfide and other noxious gases. They don't lyophilize. It's a different environment for them. They try to survive. They don't put on biohazard suits. They're just like, well, metabolize something else. And in those circumstances, those bacteria, only the anaerobes survive. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Well, I think that's good. I do have some clients, I told you what our electric bill is here. It's outrageous. In California, electricity is just like gold. So some people, they want to shut their life support systems off at nighttime. I usually don't recommend it. Just, especially when it gets hot here, it doesn't go to that level that you talked about, but the system,
it can when it's hot.
Yeah. I mean, if like in Coachella, it could be 105 at nighttime, so like, you could rotten up the bead filter pretty quickly here. So I always recommend, like, you just got to run them 24 hours a day, or, not have that kind of system on your pond. Do something different.
Yeah, exactly. This to not have that kind of system on your pond, because cutting them off for 12 hours could be a liability.
Yeah,
a liability. Maybe not a giant one. There might be people out there who are going, dude, I turned my bead filter off for a whole day and it doesn't matter. I'm like, okay, cool. Whatever. I got all the way to my grandmother's house without my seatbelt. I didn't end up splashed on the windshield. So whatever. But, when you're running an ecosystem pond, there's no pressurized system. There's no place where oxygen doesn't get. And so they could turn those systems off at night and just run an air stone. Like they could have a regenerative blower in their house running 4 stones out there in the pond, and they could turn everything off and have plenty of aeration. But when you have a closed pressurized system, it doesn't have to be a bead filter, but any place where oxygen gets cut off when the power does, that's where the liability is. So
answer. There's a kind of there's a challenging question here, because in your book, Saving Sick Fish, we'll talk about it again, Saving Sick Fish, we're talking about aquarium fish and we're talking about pond fish. We're talking about a wide spectrum of stuff. So, but Lisa wants to know, what's your stocking recommendations per gallons of inch of koi fish in a properly maintained ecosystem pond? So now that's a good question, right? Ecosystems, not dedicated. Like,
yeah. So, man, all right, I'll stock the hell out of it with small fish, like 3-inch, 5-inch fish. I will stock way beyond any formula of 1 inch of fish per 10 gallons of water, which is a great guideline. But when they're really small, their biological footprint is kind of small, really. So like I'll have far more than 1 inch of fish in 10 gallons of water. Then as the fish get bigger, I start backing off that and start getting closer to the 1 inch of fish in 10 gallons of water. But see, then if you're using an ecosystem pond, they carry so much more than a dragster system because they got plants helping you out. They got plants reducing nitrates, which there's nothing on the dragster side that can do that. And you've got gravel in the system, so it's supporting ambifrier, bacteriophages, and other things that allow you to carry more fish. Those systems are extra easy to provide trickle water placement to, whereas a high pressure system sometimes not so much because they don't discharge rain the way that normally an ecosystem pond does. So you can load an ecosystem pond a lot heavier than you could a dragster system. So if you're doing an ecosystem pond, you're going to get to carry more inches of fish per 10 gallons of water than you otherwise would. And it has to do with kind of like prevailing temperatures, how much you feed, kind of what kind of fish, what the distribution of sizes are, what kind of filtration you got, and again, how much water are you replacing per week or month. And so there's variables. But I guess to answer the question, when they're really little, you can stock beyond 1 inch of fish per 10 gallons. When they get bigger and bigger, their oxygen demands and their biological imprint on the system is way worse. So like 30 inches of one fish is way worse than 30 inches of 10 3-inch fish on that environment.
By a landslide. By a landslide.
By a landslide, yeah. One 30-inch fish produces way more waste and demands more oxygen than 10 3-inch fish.
So one thing I want to add, Lisa, is there's anomalies that kind of happen in for instances. Okay, so I remember one pond, it was 8 by 11, and it was maybe a 300-gallon pond, maybe 400 tops, very, very small. And my wife's shaking her head but she's thinking about a different pond. It's a different one, but it's very similar in regard. But the pond had a leak in it.
Oh,
And so it was constant fresh water. And I probably have I can count 5 times in my, over 2 decades of building ponds and servicing ponds where the pond had just a subtle enough leak. It was like a trickle system flow through happening in the pond. And yeah, and it was just like constant water changes. And the chlorine, they weren't worried about chlorine and chloramines. It was a miracle. It's another anomaly, constant water flow. And I think there was like, gosh, if I remember, there was over a dozen, like probably 12 or 13, just monster koi in this 300-gallon pond. They were probably all 24 inches, at least. A dozen, like do the math, a dozen 24-inch fish in 300 gallons of water. It's like, that's not normal.
like they could barely move.
Yeah,
Like,
they just were like bumping into each other. I'm
Yeah.
like, holy crap. Now, here's the thing as a service tech. It's like, hey, they figured out they have a leak. Hey, I have a leak in the pond. Will you fix it? Nope. I'm not fixing that leak. No way. If I fix that leak, all those fish are dead in a month. There's no way I'm fixing your leak. So that's another thing that we have to confront. Imagine a guy who just started building ponds, been doing it for 2 or 3 years. He's like, yeah, I'll fix your pond. I'll fix your leak. Not realizing that the consequences that could come from it.
Right.
Crazy anomaly.
So the contractors should look at that as like a selling point. They'd be like, God damn it. My pond's down an inch of water every day. This thing's got a leak. I want my money back. And you're sitting there going, oh, no, that's a value added feature. We do that in all the ponds. It's to make sure that there's plenty of water replacement at all times. So it's a good thing. So, because it really is, really. Oh my God, 12, 24-inch fish in 400 gallons.
Yeah, it's obscene.
You could do that if you replaced a lot of water, which apparently she was.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Yeah.
I got a lot of fun stories like that. Okay, listen, I do want to button this up because I got you. We're almost at 2 hours. It's amazing to have that kind of time with you. It's very special to me. But someone just jumped on here, asked a question, and you're going to have to tell me a yes or no how you do this. But Steve Wilson says it's a really cool discussion. What are the chances Dr. Johnson would want to do this again sometime?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So here's something that I'm gonna throw this out at you because I'd love to have you on, multiple times on the podcast. But tell everyone about your Saving Sick Fish group where you could do live discussions there and live Q&As there. I see a good future for you in this format. Even without me, some people might be like, oh, Erik's there. God, let's just get Dr. Johnson.
Right.
So, but tell people about joining that group because I think I want to press people to join your Saving Sick Fish, the group on Facebook where you might be doing some stuff like this.
Yeah. To answer the question briefly, there's 4 or 5 Facebook groups that I participate in. To speak specifically, the ones that I participate in that you're in. And you're also in the Saving Sick Fish ones. There's 2 of the Saving Sick Fish groups. One of them is people who bought the book, and there's one that didn't buy the book, and that's fine. The savingsickfish.org private group for book purchasers, I check in there every day, and I go, you guys got any questions? So like literally by buying the book, they can ask me anything they want. So it's kind of like for the $30 it costs you to get the book, you get consults with me for a year. And actually it's a year after the last book sells. I decided that if I decide not to do it anymore, then the last copy of the book that sells sets the year mark, and I'll support it with everything for a year. I got to die sooner or later. But there's also a savingsickfish.org open, and you don't have to buy the book, and you can get on there. And if you post a question and I can answer it, or I happen to be on that board that day, I will. So if you get on Facebook and you look up basically Saving Sick Fish or savingsickfish.org open, Saving Sick Fish is the private group, and Saving Sick Fish open is the open group.
And
then I'm just
they get
or they can go to savingsickfish.org, and there's links to the website and the Facebook groups and all that other stuff. If you're directly connected with Erik Triplett, Pond Digger, and you need me, you can reach out to him, and he knows how to get in touch with me. Like, so if you're Erik Triplett's best customer or something like that, like, dude, I'm losing $30,000 worth of fish, God damn it. I want to talk to Erik, the other Erik. He'll probably help you out. I'll any friend of Erik's be a friend of mine. So that'd be fine. I'd come back on and do the show anytime. It's fun.
Okay.
So
let's plan on that. And I'm excited about your other books coming out. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. Next time we talk, I think there's a lot of value in talking about, we've been feeding a raw food diet to our dogs, and like just total game changer for us. So let's save that as a little teaser for something that we'll talk about on our next podcast that we do together. But let's let this marinate, and let's get some more questions that get dropped at me, and I'll put out a post out there. Any more questions you have, hit me up, and then we'll jump on maybe in a few weeks and do another one. I think that would be amazing.
Beautiful.
Okay, moving forward, what's the best way? I think you just shared savingsickfish.org is the best way to get involved with you. You're also on Instagram and TikTok, though. Tell me about this, because I see you really pressing hard in there, and I'm very, very proud of you for this.
Well, it's I don't know. It's like watching old people eat. I mean, like the whole social media. I know, right? Is some shit on your chin. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. I know that I got all my social media, everything, Facebook, everything is hashtag Erik Johnson DVM. So if you go to TikTok and you look up Erik Johnson DVM, there I am. You go to Instagram, Reddit, so many social media. It's always on all of them, including Facebook. It's Erik Johnson DVM, Erik with a K, the normal way that people spell Erik. So yeah, it's the same on all of the different media. So they shouldn't be hard to find me at all. So.
Okay. Any final words you want to say, love?
Well, I just want to clarify, when they buy the book, the link to the secret Facebook group where you check in every day is in here.
Yeah, well, you get a note with a thing. It comes on the cover of the book, and there's a note that says, hey, whatever, we got a Facebook group for you guys. Well, I don't know. Have you seen my library? Yeah. So and you can get in there. You got the book. So like on the last page of the book, there's a lexicon of codes.
Oh, I saw that.
And if you go, yeah. So if you go to savingsickfish.org, you can go to my library, and I digitized all my books. So like you can go in there and you can like read. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of books in there that I read. They're not my books. They're just books that are in my library, and you need a code from the book. And you just enter the code, and you can go in there and just flip through these books, 30-year-old books on fish health from Germany, just whatever I have valued, I put them on there, and you can read my personal library of books. So if you're a nerd and you want to know, what is it called when there's 5 different forms of Gyrodactylus in the belly of other ones, it's actually in there. So there's a lot of resources and stuff that you get when you buy the book. And it's only because you can't do a book like that and then open it up to 6 million people. There's no way. Mm-hmm. And so the book kind of narrows it down a little bit more. And then if you have the codes from the back of the book, you get stuff. And so I think it's worth it. You should check out the library, Erik. There's some pretty good books in there.
I will.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to close it out. Listen, everyone, go to savingsickfish.org, get your book, get in contact with Erik Johnson. And listen, this right here is the Bible. Get this if you don't have it. Put it in your library, your personal library at home. I recommend that you get both of those books. And then I'm going to close this out. Thank you so much for your ears, eyes, and attention. We are now putting this on YouTube, so you can check us out live on YouTube and look at Erik Johnson's smiling face as we're having this conversation. Until next download, we hope you guys dig ponds and fish as much as we do.